There's a special rung in hell reserved for people who waste good scotch.
Say, how many drinks?
This will make 6 martinis.
All right. Will you bring me 5 more martinis? Leo, line them right up here.
How do you know this?
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
Do you know how much of my blood and sweat are in this drink? Figure of speech.
All right. Welcome to the Ananas podcast. My name is Sven, and I'm the founder of Ananas, an online training and management platform for the bar and restaurant industries. And I'm also the host for this podcast, where I get to interview and hang out with some of the most inspirational people in our industry in an attempt to try and figure out what it is they do differently in order to achieve their success. In this episode, we have a fellow Norwegian joining us. Monica Berg is an internationally acclaimed bar professional and entrepreneur who currently resides in London, where she recently opened her first bar, Tayer Elementary, to much critical acclaim. She's also a co-founder of Pour with Alex Kratena, a co-owner and founder of Muyu Liquors, as well as an online safe space for workers in the hospitality industry called Back of House. She's also an inductee in the Tales of the Cocktail Dames Hall of Fame. A multi-award-winning bartender, Monica is considered one of the world's most influential bar professionals and has, in addition to working bars, also spent a considerable amount of time traveling the world as a consultant and running her own businesses. I had an amazing time chatting to Monica about everything from her love of akvavit, a Norwegian national spirit, to what it takes to be a great bartender and how to add value as a consultant, to what it's like to open your first bar, and much, much more. I had an amazing time chatting to Monica, and I learned a lot along the way as well. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Welcome to the show, Monica. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great, actually. So, yeah.
Fantastic. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. It took a while for us to tee it up, but I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. It's the first time I'm talking to a fellow Norwegian on here, so I'm really, really excited to have this chat with you.
No, exactly. And probably best that we don't do it in Norwegian if we want other people to understand as well. But, you know,
dude, it's good we're not.
It's
good we're not doing it in Norwegian, because I wouldn't be able to ask any questions. My Norwegian is terrible. I came to Norway to do a talk at the Oslo Bar Show a few years ago, and I had to do the presentation in English. And the guys are like, "Why? You speak Norwegian?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, I never really, did bars in Norwegian. So that whole world is English to me. So I need to do it in English."
Yeah, but it's strange because I feel very similar, because all of the sources, all the books you read, everything you ever learn almost in this industry, at least the last decade, everything is in English, so it's very difficult.
Oh, it's 100%. So, but I want to start off though. Before, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but because we are talking about Norway, I do want to start a little bit differently than we normally would, by talking a bit about akvavit, or aquavit, I think it's called in English. So you were awarded, I'm so jealous, the Linje Honorary Award, which sounds just hella dope, for your great ambassadorship for Norwegian food and drink culture, I think in 2015. And you've been, mixing drinks and spreading the aquavit love for some time. So I love aquavit. Sada's my wife, which is fucking hella dope. And so I'd love for you to share a few words with our listeners about what the hell is akvavit, why should they be stocking it and mixing it with behind their bars? Because not enough bars stock akvavit.
Well, obviously for me, and perhaps to a certain degree for you as well, it's more than just a spirit category. It's also our heritage. But the reason why I love aquavit is both because, yes, it is our heritage, and I feel strongly that we need to protect these items and make sure that they don't disappear, because it's so deeply connected to the customs, society, to how we are as a food and drinks nation, but also because if you look at aquavit purely by itself, no traditional anchors or anything, aquavit is a great flavor builder. As a spirit, at least in Norway, it's made from potatoes, and then it's a botanical spirit in the same way as gin, except that what I would describe the botanicals to be more warm spiced, then maybe gin is a little bit more cooler spiced, and then you have the caraway, which is just an incredible ingredient to bring out other flavors to me. So seen from a cocktail perspective, I always use aquavit as a spice. Sometimes I use it in 5 mils, 10 mils, 15 mils. Other times I use it as the main kind of base. And especially if you work with food a lot, like I do, it's just an incredible way to build depth of flavor and to make complexity. Because if you look at the composition of the spirit, you have all of these kind of botanical herb notes from the botanicals, but then when you put aging into the picture as well, you have also the best from the worlds of like whiskeys, cognacs, whatever, because of the impact of the wood. So you really can pick and choose from any kind of flavor profile within the spirit category, and just you can always find an aquavit that matches that. So for me, I always say that if you want to make cocktails, then you should definitely have aquavit, and sometimes it's about just enhancing the nose there. And then of course, traditionally, if you look at the spirit itself, it was always either a medicine or used in accompaniment to food. So it works as a digestive, it works as a partner with a beer. So it's just, I don't know, for me it's just a perfect spirit.
It's so versatile as well. I love how I obviously I don't spend that much time in Norway, but when I do go back, I do bring back some aquavit, and I love how they often promote, when the same distillery releases different types of aquavit, they do it to be matched with different types of protein quite often. So this is to go with deer, and this is to go with such and such, and this goes, say, with salmon. So even from a distillery perspective, they're matching the product to food, which I think is quite unique in the spirit world.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's also, it's the legislation in Norway is, or has been, both a curse and a blessing, I think, because Norway from the last 100 years has had a monopoly. So yes, of course, it's always it challenges the capitalism side of doing business. But what it has done is to protect all the traditional and historical recipes. So if you're the only one that makes something, obviously you don't really care about your competition, and you can keep some of those historical recipes alive even if they don't make money. But you do it because maybe they're delicious, or maybe they're important because of historical significance. And so that's why in Norway you have so many different aquavits. And I would assume right now it's maybe 100, 120 different ones. And
wow.
For me, when I moved to UK, it was one of my biggest struggles in the beginning, because I'm so used to like building my flavor profiles with just a little bit of aquavit. I always know which aquavit to go to, but obviously outside of Norway, there's not as many available. So I went from having like 120 something to play around with to having 2.
Oh.
Like, well, how am I supposed to work like this?
How am I supposed to work like this? There's no aquavit. That's funny. I mean, I hardly ever mix aquavit. I think when I worked in Norway, it's a long time ago, there was a drink called Fjellbeck, which I think is basically translate like mountain stream, and it's like a vodka lime and soda with some lemonade added to it, I think, but with aquavit instead of vodka and soda and lemonade and lime or something like that. I normally drink mine with just a dash of water, like a whiskey. How would you drink aquavit, and do you drink yours differently depending on like what kind of brand it is, an occasion? Like when you enjoy an akvavit, how would you have it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely depends on which one, because if I have some of the more aged ones, then I would probably just drink it neat as I would a whiskey. Whereas if I have some of the, in the middle range, which not too much sweetness, but not too pronounced of the botanicals, I would maybe have it as a shot, or I do like it in a cocktail. But in general, I quite like to drink aquavit neat, and just like sip it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, with some beer maybe. I love it. Now, speaking of akvavit, I came across an akvavit-based cocktail that you created called Equal Opportunity, and I thought I'd use that as a segue to talk a bit about gender equality. So, when I interview influential and prominent women in our industry, I always weigh up whether or not should I bring up the topic of gender equality. But having listened to some of your podcasts and read some of your interviews, I do get the feeling that it's a topic that you are quite passionate about. So, and we both come from a country that, at least the way I remember it, was a leader when it came to gender equality. We had a female prime minister when I was a kid. Gro Harlem Brundtland, I think, became a prime minister when I was 7, back in 81. And she, when I was a teenager from 86 to 96, I think she was the prime minister. Massive lead up here. But I always looked to Norway as a place where we had, compared to when I moved to Australia at least. Did you find that you were treated differently as a female bartender outside of Norway versus in Norway? And have you at any time in your career found that you've either been held back or propelled forward because of gender? It's a bit of a kind of big question.
Yeah, it is a big question, and well, it's difficult to answer also, because obviously I can only look at it from my point of view. But I think in general, I will say that equality is an important topic to me, and not necessarily only limited to gender, but also in general. And I think that for the big majority of my career, I was only considered, even by myself, just a bartender. And it was only when I started to become, I don't know how you measure how you're a good bartender, to be honest, but it was only when I started to become more, recognized perhaps for what I do, that people gave me this title, female bartender. And I was like, really? I don't really know what that means, but okay, I guess I can't really do anything about it because I haven't experienced being anything else, I guess. So I feel that I was never necessarily too held back by being a woman, and I feel that in the instances where I was, it wasn't necessarily always by men. I feel some of my biggest supporters and my best bosses or managers or allies, or whatever you want to call them, have always been men, or like male colleagues that I've worked with. So I'm not sure if I was very lucky in having been surrounded by the right people. But at the same time, when I started to travel more and I started to see more of the rest of the world and see how women are treated in other parts of the world, I understood also that I myself might find it sometimes annoying to be asked, how does it feel to be a female bartender, or to be asked like, hey, we need a female to be part of this, whatever. Can you be the female bartender? I was like, okay,
wow.
Thank you.
That happens.
Like, it happens, and it happens even today, but you also have to see on the flip side, if you choose to only be offended, if you choose to not show up, if you choose not to take that spot you're offered, regardless of what kind of criteria they give it to you for, then you lose the chance to speak up, and I feel that when you are in a position where you have a voice that people will listen to, then you have to speak up when things are not right. So, it took me a while to, I think, get to that place, but also not only because, you obviously become wiser or smarter as you kind of age and get more experience, but also because, and you probably went through the same thing when you moved to Australia. It's like when you change your scenery, when you move to a different country, you have to find yourself in your new environment. You have to find the way to be as expressive or to be as able to verbalize what your thoughts and emotions are in your new language. And for me, it took a few years to be able to, have a conversation at the same level that I would be able to in Norwegian, if that makes sense at all. But
Of course.
it was very frustrating in the beginning when I moved to UK, because obviously, yes, I speak English. I've spoken English since I learned it at school, but you don't have the same vocabulary or the eloquence to have a discussion like you would be able to in, for example, your mother tongue. So for me, I was always, I felt it was difficult to get involved in this discussion because I wouldn't be able to, say what I wanted. And now I feel much more equipped to have that discussion. So I feel like I need to speak up when I say things are wrong, in my opinion.
That's great. I think I read somewhere that you often offer advice. I think when you're traveling or people kind of reach out to particularly women who since you're being seen as a bit of a spokesperson, what kind of advice are you offering these people that or these women that seek you out in the industry? Is there anything specific that you tell them, and seize the opportunity, or like things you mentioned before? What's the kind of advice you offer them when people do reach out?
Well, I think in general, I think a lot of people reach out regardless of being male or female, and I think for a lot of younger bartenders or younger people in general, it's they reach out because they're missing some kind of guidance, because our industry is not an industry where you can just go to university and get like a bulk of your education done mandatory or done by an institution. Our kind of profession is much more based on your own initiatives. So I think a lot of younger bartenders, they feel very confused and very lost, because essentially so many things have happened in our industry over the last decade or so. So I find that one of the biggest problems with our industry is perhaps that we're missing a few generations of bartenders, and those generations are the generations that would previously be the ones teaching the younger kids now. Like my generation, where I've worked for a decade as a bartender, barback, server, anything, whatever, and then I started stepping into management, whatever. And then for the last few years, I've been a business owner and I run my own company. But I still work 6 days a week in service, so which
Wow.
is becoming much more rare, I think, because a lot of the people that I came up with or grew up with in this industry, they are now either managers that doesn't necessarily work behind the bar anymore, or they're brand ambassadors, or they're kind of whatever. And so you don't really have people to be there like day in, day out, and kind of telling you what to do and teaching you the ins and out. And so that's a few things that people always ask about, how can they find someone to teach them? How can they find ways to learn? How can they filter through all the information out there? But also you see that specifically for a lot of the female bartenders or younger women, they kind of they they struggle to find their identity, I guess, because there's this myth that you have to be one of the guys, you have to be like rude and crude, I don't know, whatever. You have to be like the guys. And for me, I never tried to be one of the guys, because I understand that I will never be one of the guys. So as much as I admire kind of this bond that guys sometimes have, and the kind of loyalty and the friendship that they can sometimes build, I wish that I kind of could be one of the guys, but it's not possible. I mean, I can be a friend, I can be part of the group, I can be equal in every way, but it just have to accept the fact that we're all different. And I think that being different doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, because I generally always worked in teams that are quite gender balanced. Sometimes it dips one way, sometimes it dips the other way, but I find that the more diversity you have with the people you surround yourself with, the more it will improve not only your work, your quality of life, your happiness, your vision of the world. Because if you're only exposed to people that thinks the same way you do, then the world becomes a very small place.
Yeah, that's 100% right. That's a really interesting take. I think back in the day when I decided to go to study in Australia, and I discovered that Norway was covering pretty much the full cost of doing it. It's a small bit you got to pay, a third or a quarter of money you get, you got to pay back. The rest is just a scholarship. The reasoning behind it that I was told at the time, I can't remember who told me, was that they decided at educational level in Norway they prefer to send a good portion of people overseas, understanding that some would never come back. So they would bring back different opinions and different ways of doing things and different ways of different types of learnings and different views. Whereas if we gave them all exactly the same educational agenda locally, we would just produce one type of, or very limited kind of type of architects or whatever journalists, whatever the degree was. So I love that idea of bringing diversity in and how it benefits the business. Since we're on the topic, I just want to, this is a big one here that gets debated a lot and something we talk a lot about in our business. How do you feel about quotas? Good, bad, necessary, not necessary in venues? So gender quotas.
Quotas as in like gender
and ethnicity or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. I think that if you have a discussion about equality and not and you can't also accept that equality will never be anything without also accepting that equity plays a big part, then you've already kind of lost. Because I think that not everyone is the same, not everyone has the same starting point in life, and you have to accept that, and you have to be open for the fact that different people need different things, and that's not necessarily a weakness. So I think sometimes you have to give people a chance, even if it's not necessarily 100% fair, or you could say reverse discrimination, and you can only hope that the person or the individual that you give that kind of chance to, or that kind of opportunity, that they understand what they're being given and that they raise to the occasion and they seize that opportunity. Because I think it's just, if everyone was starting from the same starting point, then I would say then the strongest person win, or not even the strongest, the fastest, whatever measures you measure people by. But since that is not the case, then I don't think you can deny the need for customizing both business and society and everything around the fact that people are different. I don't think that being different is necessarily a bad thing.
No, I
So I would
agree.
say,
So you 4 quotas, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say to a certain degree, as long as it's done in a respectful way and it's done in a productive way,
Yeah.
then yes.
I think the way so I am very much pro quotas. The way I kind of think of it is people often view like one job role as a competition between whoever's applying for that one job, but really it's about who's going to fit best into the rest of the team. And
100%.
and that's so it's not really about how that person fits against the others that are applying. It's more about how that person fits against the people who are already on the team. And it's a bit like you say, you can't just hire 11 strikers because they're all great soccer players. You're going to need a goal and you're going to need someone in the midfield and some people in defense. And I think that the when I look at it that way, that the team, there's so much research that says, a team just works better when you have, equality of gender, more diverse teams, etc. Better for the business. So I think just kind of getting rid of the idea that it's a competition between applicants and more about a team looking for a fit, makes it a lot easier for us to go, the quotas are important because on our team we need these defenders and these attackers and whatever the heck it is. And it makes it easier for us to balance, at least in our business, when we try to do it. But it's a conversation I find very interesting to have. I want to go. I talk a lot about entrepreneurship, but before we get into all the amazing stuff you've been doing just recently, I want to go back and ask you a couple of questions about the early days. So normally when we do this podcast, I go back into the early days, but I was so keen to talk about Aktivate with you. So we skipped around a bit. But so, if you go back to your first kind of few years in hospitality, was there anything? I find, we're quite impressionable when we first start out, and we quite often get taught things that are completely wrong. But we also quite often learn, some big lessons that we keep with us almost forever. So can you think of any one or two things that you learned in your first year or two working in bars and restaurants that you've kept with you to this day and that you still refer back to as a, this is a, an important part of hospitality?
I think, sorry. Well, yes. I mean, let me think. I think I started working in hospitality when I was 15, but obviously not with alcohol. But and I started working in an amusement park actually in Norway, and it was because I was so young, and because so many of the people that I worked with were so young, they had to be really structured when they did all the trainings and all the kind of messaging and education, and that kind of always guided me since, in the sense that I value education, I value training, I value, the team building exercises that make you, or take away not take away, but it takes you away from being individuals to being a team and one unit. And so it really taught me that it's difficult to prioritize sometimes when you're really busy, but education and training, it's the core at any successful business. It also, I had this incident when I was, I think 20, where basically I had to cut off a guest, and the guest went kind of nuts. And
they sometimes do.
Long story, yeah. Well, long story short, this one went extra nuts. So he ended up, luckily for me, not beating me, but attacking my boss at the time, because he stepped in to protect me.
Wow.
And he ended up going to jail. So But it just taught me, one, never to put people in situations where, where they feel uncomfortable. So when someone tells you that I don't feel comfortable, like working alone late at night or closing by myself or something, listen to this. But secondly, also, that you always have to stick by your team. So regardless who's in charge, regardless what happens, if in a situation where you front guests, if someone cuts someone off, if someone says no, if something happens and you have to like choose to be on the side of your colleague, team staff or team member or whatever, or the side of the guest, then you should always choose to support your team, regardless of who is right or who is wrong.
Wow, those are some great lessons early on. And I gotta say, I really agree. I love the fact that training, you value it so much and you see it so important. I think it's one of the unfortunately great failures of the hospitality industry at large is that there's been a lack of structured training and education for people who come into the industry, which is obviously the purpose behind Ananas. But I think that it's so true. The having a well-trained team, better service, more fun service, more confident people behind the bar. People enjoy their work when they can take pride in it and be good at it. But unless people train you, you don't feel like there is value or is skill needed. If it's just like jump behind the bar and do your best, it doesn't send a good message to the team.
No, exactly.
So during this time, did you have any mentors, say in Norway or elsewhere in your early days? And if you did you have any valuable lessons that you learned from them along the way?
I would say that in my early bartending years, I would say that I did have some people, but also I had this very adventurous side. I don't know what to call it, but so I've always enjoyed education personally. I always enjoyed going to school. I always enjoyed learning and being in situations that make maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable because you don't really know what you're doing and you have to learn by doing. So in the beginning, I rarely spent more than 1 year in any given place because I always said that, what, I'm not too good at making cocktails technically, so I'm going to go and work in a cocktail bar. I'm not too fast. I'm going to go and work in a nightclub. I'm not the most, the best host. I'm going to go and work in a pub. So, I try to, because I couldn't find one place that would teach me all of these things, or one person, so I just jumped around trying to find places that would teach me what I wanted. And then when I felt that I had achieved that, or I felt that I went to work and there's nothing to look forward to anymore, then I'll find a different place to go and work. So it's definitely made me, maybe look at building a CV and traditional, because for me, I don't really care if you spent the obligatory 1 year there or before you move on to the next one, because I always say to people, because it was told to me, it's like, would you rather be somewhere for a whole year because it looks good on your CV but you are unhappy, or would you just be a person that takes action and say, what, this is not for me, I'm going to go somewhere else? And as long as you can answer, you can tell people why you left somewhere, then I don't see a problem with not having stayed so many or stayed the full year somewhere. So I think some of my early mentors maybe I would definitely say Sigrid, who was my kind of boss when I was working at Ringnes, which is the biggest kind of commercial brewer in Norway.
Yes.
And I used to work there at the kind of beer academy where you do beer trainings and tastings and seminars and classes, and you basically teach people about drinking beer, tasting beer, liking beer, but also you teach the industry about, serving beer, cleaning glasses, and all of these things. And I think when we spoke about gender equality and such in the beginning, that was also, like an example where you have a very strong woman, very good at what she does, and she just kind of helped me develop this very deep love for beer and understanding that side of things. So she was definitely great. Later, but still very impactful, I would say that Joachim, who was my last boss in Norway before I moved to UK, he has probably impacted my career more than anyone, because he was always he's a very generous person, but also he's the kind of person who pushes you out of your comfort zone, and really force you to kind of step up, even if you don't know it at the time. And I always say that it's very powerful to have someone believe in you, and have someone that believes in you more than yourself, because it opens so many possibilities when that happens. And that's kind of now my goal is to be that kind of person for my team or for the people I have around me, because for me it just was so detrimental to the choices that I made later, to have someone who just blindly trusts in you and believe that you can do anything, even if it means that they not lose you, but lose you because you move on.
That's awesome. I love that. I love the how powerful it is to have someone like that believes in you. Also, really found it interesting. I've asked a few people this question, and a number of people have talked about how they would go one place to learn about wine, another place to learn about beer, and a third place to learn about hosting, etc. And I think it's really interesting that you sought out those skills and went to a place we could add to your skill set rather than just your CV. I think for those outside the bar industry, it probably is quite surprising to learn that where you can go today as a bartender in terms of consulting and traveling the world and these things. But I don't think it takes something to get there. Excuse me. What, in your words, like what characteristics do you have that you believe has helped you get where you are today? So, like in terms of, what would you say is your competitive advantages that has helped you take you to where you are today?
I think, well, first and foremost, I think, like my parents, they raised me having a very good kind of, I don't know if this sounds very highbrow, but to have a good like moral compass, no, like
Yes.
to, I have certain things that my parents told me, like you should always be polite, you should always do what you promise people that you will do, you should always work hard, you should always show up on time, all of these kind of basic things, but that aren't necessarily basic, like I think there's a few things that we always try to live by, and one of them is like under promise, over deliver. You always show up, and you should always exceed expectations. You should always like work harder than anyone else, and you should always be prepared. So I remember when I did this big cocktail competition a few years ago, and I showed up as prepared as I could be, and everyone made fun of me because I brought my own ice scoop, I brought my own everything, and it's like, why? You have everything here. And I was like, well, do you? How do you know? You know?
Yeah.
And like, when I put myself in situations that, or in any kind of situation, if you have a choice of controlling everything that will happen or not controlling everything that will happen, why would you choose not to control something if you can control it? You know?
100%.
And this is just how we always look at every kind of situation, both with, you know, with Alex or with the team. And we try to anticipate what's going to happen, and we try to adjust for that, because you always will make mistakes happen, doesn't matter, you just brush it off and you move on, and you learn from it, you know.
Oh,
But
100%.
um I think, yeah, like sometimes, well, I can be quite like impatient, but I've learned that I need to have more patience. But you know, sometimes there's no shortcuts, or not sometimes. There's never any shortcuts. You just have to either do the work to get to where you want to, or you have to like accept the fact that if you're not willing to do the work, then you won't necessarily be the best or the whatever you want to be, or as successful as you want to be, maybe. But you know, there's never any substitute for hard work. So if you want to be successful by any measure, then you have to work for it.
That's great. I also love that you know how you talked about exceeding expectations. I think that's I mean, for me, anything that we ever do when we were consulting, especially, I always, you know, every job we were like, well, the client expects this, so you know, and if we just do what they expect, it's okay, you know, that's all they wanted, but we may not get another job, you know. So in order for us to get more work, we have to do better than what they want, what they're expecting us to, so that when they are, you know, they get more value from money than they anticipate. That's how you get return business. And same for bars and restaurants. If someone comes into a bar and restaurant and they have a meal, a few drinks, everything is 100% in line with what they expect for the price they paid, they'll walk out and, yeah, that was fine. They're not going to go online and leave you a 5-star review because they just got what they paid for. It's when they leave going, oh my God, that was amazing. The food was great. The music was fantastic. The host was incredible. The bartender was brilliant. The waitress was friendly, whatever. And, you know, and when you exceed their expectations, that's when you, you know, when things really start to roll. So I really, really loved hearing you say that. You know, talking about, you mentioned Alex and so I thought maybe we'd, you know, talk a little bit about some of the consultancy and brand work you've done. I used to be a consultant back in the day myself, and I know it can look a bit glamorous on the outside, but I know there's a lot of work that goes into it. How did you get into, you know, doing consultancy work? At what point did you decide that was an avenue you wanted to go down? Because it is very different to service.
Yes, it is very different. To be honest, I kind of just fell into it, if I'm completely honest, and it just happened so gradually that you almost didn't notice. And you know, it started just very innocently in the sense that, you know, this is a small industry, everyone knows each other, so sometimes people come, hey, can you just help me with this, what's your opinion about this? And then at some point you understand that this is something that you can charge for, but then if you're charging for it, then you have to like step up and actually commit to this being work. You can't just like have an opinion and walk away. And then
too many people do that.
Well, exactly. And then, you know, when I left my last like day-to-day proper working job that I had, not in my own company capacity, was, you know, back in 2014, and I left there knowing that the next bar job that I have will be my own bar. And then we are just very slow people not necessarily by choice, but just that's how it happened, and that's what happened. So we obviously didn't end up opening our own bar until 2019, last year. So, in this kind of space between, I had to find a way where I could work that would also give me freedom to work on my own projects. And so by doing these kind of consultancy works, whether it's for bars or hotels or restaurants, or whether it's for brands, it just gives you a lot of freedom to work from either your house, or to have like very condensed days of when you have to be somewhere, and it allows you to continue to work on your own projects. And obviously, we also wanted to find a way for us to open our bar and have our bar be our bar, if you know what I mean, like in the sense that we are the majority owners of our bar.
Yes.
And obviously that takes money, so you have to find a way to make a living and to be able to build your capital so that you can achieve what you want. So, for me personally, I don't necessarily well, I do and I don't, because I really enjoy the creation of something. I enjoy being part of like the idea, and then building that idea and set it out to life. But I maybe don't enjoy so much being the enforcer, for example.
Yes.
So what I find is kind of my strength is the conception of the idea, and building like a brand, or building a bar, or building a concept for whatever, and then finding other people maybe and put them in to the project, and they can kind of enforce it once it's there and execute. But it depends also, but I feel that for me it was more a way to get what I wanted rather than being what I wanted itself.
That's and it's really great to recognize that, when you're doing things for a different purpose, and maybe not, letting it define you. I think the consultancy game is an interesting piece. I spent 10 years, I suppose, consulting, but towards the end of it, I wasn't really executing much at all. We had 30 full-time staff and 70 consultants, I think, a part of the team. But at the time, there was such a rush to get into consulting. A lot of people wanted to do it. And I think still today, there's a lot of consultancy work, floating around out there. Do you have any advice to people who are looking to step into the consultancy game? Again, consulting is very different to service. And so different skill sets are required, I think, to be a great consultant. Do you have any advice, any learnings along the way that you can share with listeners who might be thinking about stepping in and doing consultancy work?
I think that you definitely have to have the right expectations, because and as you say, there's a very different set of skills that you need to walk into this world, because depending on kind of what level you want to go in as well. If you want to create a cocktail menu for a neighborhood bar, or for any kind of like bar with ambitions, or restaurant, whatever, that's one thing. But if you want to go into like in the consultancy game, where you perhaps are consulting for chains with like hundreds of outlets, or hotels where there's regional differences, there's like difference between doing 1 or 2 units and doing 100 units globally, or to work with brands where you have to accept that sometimes from the beginning of the project till the end of the project, or till the birth of the actual product, it can take anything from 2 to 5 years. Yeah. So it's about understanding that this is not something that you go into because you want to massage your ego. This is business, And you might have been great at creating cocktails or doing competitions, whatever, but if you can't deliver on those deadlines, then boom, you're gone. So you have to understand that this is this is work, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices, because at I remember for the last few years before we opened our bar, it was people always would make digs at you, and there's like, yeah, so when are you going to go back to work? When are you going to like start doing anything? You never do anything. I just see you traveling, you enjoying, doing fuck all. And it was like, you know what? For the last like 3 years of my life, I spend maybe 320, 330 days a year on the road. I am alone all the time. I almost never see my partners. I don't see my family. I don't have the luxury that I can go home for even my birthday or Christmas or Easter, whatever. I work, and then I do nothing else. So to say that I don't do anything is completely wrong. It's just that the way that business works is that when you are there to train a team or to create a concept for someone else, you don't put that on Facebook. It's because Facebook is irrelevant when it comes to business or that side of business. It's you can't, and sometimes you have to play hard as well. You have to understand your skill set, but you also have to understand your value. And if you see that people are not willing to pay for your skills, then you shouldn't give it to them. So a lot of the work that, for example, we've done over the years is by contract. The clients, they are not allowed to speak about it because they were not willing to pay for our names, or the fact that we are associated with the project, because they didn't want a partnership, they wanted a consultancy. And if that's what you want, that's what you get. So
yeah. That's really interesting, and I love how you again, the fact that you mentioned so much work, how you've been doing the last couple of years, brings me into another thing I wanted to ask you about. I got so many questions for you. You'll be I promise it won't be all day, but I got so many things I'll ask you about. So when I was doing the research before this chat, I always try to do a good bit of research. I realized that 2019 must just have been a bonkers year for you. I mean, it sounds like the last 3-4 years have been crazy, but you launched your own liqueur brand early 2019, I think. Opened your first venue as an owner operator in May, and then in December, I read you launched an online safe space for workers in the hospitality industry called Tobacco House. Fucking hell! So that's a big year. So I want to ask you just around that. So how do you get so much work done? So do you have any hacks or time management or productivity tricks or routines, anything that helps you achieve such a huge output of work? What's the secret to getting shit done?
To be fair, I must say that sometimes you have to just surrender to time and accept that things are not going to happen when you plan for them to happen. So, for example, with the bar and Muyu, our liqueurs as well, both of those were actually scheduled for 2018. It just didn't happen that way. I
know that feeling.
Yeah, because it's been projects that we worked on for a long time. It just, you can't control, in the big scheme of things, you can't control really anything. So you just have to go with the flow and roll with the punches, I guess. So, it just happened. But then obviously looking back as well, when you look back and reflect, it was a mental year. And to be honest, when we closed the bar for Christmas and went on holiday with the entire team, I've never been so tired in my whole life, I think. And it kind of made me realize that, yes, I do need to maybe find a better balance, but at the same time, I need to find a balance that is right for me, because especially in like the last few years, people are talking about finding balance and having a more mindful way and whatever to approach to life and work. But like for me, I really enjoy working. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not insinuating that other people don't, but it's, I just enjoy doing stuff. And sometimes I don't even look at it like work. It's just, oh, maybe you have an idea, and then you kind of, we always have this rule that, if you have an idea, you are allowed to follow through on that idea and to the end and see, can this become something or can it not? But, don't waste too much time. If you see that it's not a good idea, then you just like, okay, fine, and you move on. But, we're always working on ideas and projects for the future that might or might not happen, but it gives me a lot of joy. So I think that sometimes when you look at the end result, yes, it looks like you are very hardworking and very disciplined, but actually for us it's the way we have fun.
I
Some
think
of the collaborations we've done is purely because we like it and because we have fun creating it, and it's not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily meant to be a business thing or whatever.
It sounds a lot like, the. I 100% agree with you. I mean, especially when I was consulting, I found that sometimes I'd rather have a bottle of whiskey and workshop a new cocktail competition with my wife rather than going out. It's more fun to create new concepts. And if a musician spends the weekend practicing and working on music, some people may not consider that work because they also do enjoy it. And if a sportsman goes down and exercises, they may not consider it work. And I think this whole, for me, I think work-life balance is very important. But I also think that work and life is kind of the same thing. It's not like you have a life. Life and work is not part of life. You got to make it work, and if you can find enjoyment in it, that's awesome. So it sounds like your real trick to productivity is doing what you love. Is what I took out from that. By doing what you love, you're able to do more of it. Really.
Absolutely, and surrounding yourself with people that are, both different but still the same. We have a lot of people in our circle, which professionally they are doing completely different things, but the mindset is still the same.
Yes.
So when you start to have these crazy ideas, oh, we should do it like this, and then people just bring their own point of view, and then it's just the process I really like.
Awesome. Now, since we mentioned two other projects, we got to quickly talk about them as well. I want to know more. So how did this liqueur brand? How do I pronounce it? Muyu.
Yep.
How did this come about, and what are you aiming to do with the brand? Creating your own brand is pretty special.
It's so. It's a long story. I try to keep it shorter, but basically, like everything. No. So Muyu, it started out as an idea several years ago when, after, we all left our jobs at different points in time, like Alex and Simone and myself. We wanted to do something different, or we wanted to do something that was for us. So by that we mean that we wanted to, we felt kind of, uninspired. We didn't know what to do. We just needed this kind of top up of energy and inspiration and, creation. So we ended up going to Peru. We went into the Amazon, and we went with some friends of us, and we stayed with a few or a native community there, and we looked at ingredients that we'd never seen before. We met people that lived in conditions we never experienced before. We met animals that we'd never seen or never even dreamt of before, and it just gave us so much inspiration and so much, ideas, but it also taught us that, we know nothing. We know absolutely nothing in the big picture, and we wanted to, like some of the communities that you find in the Amazon, it's really some of the poorest communities you can think of. Their living condition is completely different from ours, but still they might not be rich, but they are the richest people that you can imagine, because their generosity, their warmth, their compassion, their love of life, it's so great. And so we really fell in love with the area and the people, but we also understood how vulnerable this area and the people are. So we wanted to find a way where we could contribute to the preservation of the biodiversity of the Amazon, but also, the people that live there. And, at the end of the day, we are bartenders. We don't really know anything else than making drinks. So, we started discussing like how are ways that we can help, and we ended up saying that, like, what, let's create a drinks brand, let's create a spirit. And then we started thinking, oh, spirits actually as a bartender is just limited what you can do, because you have to kind of understand the distilling process, and also with the raw materials, whatever, there's not that much we can do to affect the outcome. So why don't we take something that are essentially the same that we do every single day, but just applying it in a different form? And that is more like a liqueur, because a liqueur can be, a blend of many ingredients, and it's basically mixing different components to find a balance. And so that's why we decided on liqueur. And also because when we kind of asked around, people were saying like it's stupid to make a liqueur because it's a dying category. Why would anyone want to do that? That's like mental. And we just like, okay, that sounds like a good idea then. If enough people tell you like, oh, that's stupid, then we always find it challenging to and kind of like, yeah, let's do that. So we also recognize that, there's multiple different ways to get to starting a business, but we didn't necessarily want to do the Apple route where you start in a garage and you're small for a long time and then you grow big. So we wrote the business case basically and created like a business plan, and then we pitched it to people that we knew could help us, and we then partnered with the Kuiper because they kind of aligned with us in the vision that we wanted, which was obviously, to create something great in the liqueur category, but also, we I mean, we are bartenders after all, so we ask for obviously total creative freedom, and also that, they had to match us in donating parts of the profit to go to NGOs that works to preserve the rainforest or the Amazon. So, and they kind of said, yes, this
Wow.
is amazing. So we want to be part of this, and we will give you all of our, expertise and help in creating this future products. And then, sometimes, some things happen for a reason, other things just happen by accident. So, we ended up not agreeing necessarily for like what would be the first flavor of Muyu, because we always knew that we wanted to have a series. So the expressions that we launched last year was just the beginning, and then it will hopefully naturally grow and evolve. But we couldn't really agree on like just one flavor, so we decided to make one each. And also we understood that, if you want to work to preserve something, then maybe you shouldn't necessarily take something from there. So rather than just making liqueurs based on Amazonian products, it's much more like a kind of philosophical inspiration, where it's looking at ingredients in the same kind of new perspective as you would in when you are exploring something for the first time. So we are working with ingredients that are around us already and who is not obviously endangered or difficult to find. But at the same time, there's been one field that has been very alluring to us for many, many years, and that's obviously the perfume world. So we've been lucky to, work with a lot of perfumers over the years and work with ingredients that are not necessarily as accessible for most bartenders. And we just basically wanted to take those ingredients and make them available for every bartender, because it's something very enjoyable to be able to explore something new and learn something new, but it's much it feels much nicer when everyone can enjoy this exploration with you. So our starting point is always that we make things, or like we made these liqueurs because we specifically wanted this in our repertoire when we work in a bar, and then hopefully other bartenders will like it as well.
That's fantastic.
So, we don't actually make anything ourselves. We are much more, like a nose is in a perfume house. We create the recipe, and then we source our ingredients either from Grasse in south of France, which is by many considered to be the perfume capital of the world, and then the rest comes from Netherlands, where the Kuiper is based, and then we kind of just build the flavor profile or the recipe, and then together with the technicians. And so it's a typical, I don't know, bartender approach in that sense, but it allows us to have flavors, such as vetiver or neroli or oak moss or cedar wood available for bartenders.
I'm not even going to pretend. I'm not even going to pretend I know what all those things are. That's. I think that's an amazing story, and there's so much I loved about your answer there. I think I think this whole idea, just because people tell you that you're crazy doesn't mean it's not an amazing idea. I think I can't remember who said it now once, but I remember reading somewhere that you're onto a good idea when everybody tells you you're wrong. And then because nobody else is thinking about it. And I also think the process you guys have gone about doing it sounds extremely smart and very scalable, and hopefully it won't be not something that would dominate your lives as it probably otherwise would. Can you get this in Australia? Can we get Muyu in Australia? Do you know? Or is it where's distribution?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. We did have like an initial shipment last year to Australia, but I would assume that it's sold out by now. But we are looking to hopefully launch. Well, we did want to launch this year, but let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
And because obviously, I mean, Australia is as far away as it gets, so we just have to find the logistics.
Hey, we might be as far away as it gets, but it's also as pretty as it gets. Come on.
No, of course. I mean, it's like on the top of my bucket list and to-do list to go to Australia, but every single time it's been like close to happening. It's always been cancelled last minute, but like it is my dream to go to Australia. So hopefully.
We'll make that happen.
Soon,
2021.
soon.
Let's make that happen. That'd be awesome. We need more Norwegians here. Now let's get into. Let's chat a bit about your new baby. So, correct me if I'm saying. Am I meant to say Anne? Is it Tayer Elementary, or am I saying the plus? Well, how you pronounce it?
Yep.
Tayer Elementary. Okay, cool.
Well, to be honest, any way you want to say it is fine with me.
Oh, sweet. As long as I go in and
I just say Tayer Elementary.
as long as we go in and buy martinis. I find it interesting when consultants open venues. I was one of them. like a super quick question. I mean, did you feel like your consulting helped prepare you for opening a venue, having been probably more exposed to the business side of things for quite a while then? Or was it a step the other way? Like one thing when we had behind bars, I used to say to a lot of the stuff that came and worked for us, like, what do you want to do next? Like one of my interview questions is always, what's your job when you leave us? And it takes a while before we get there, but quite often people, I want to start opening my own bar. And I'm like, well, why do you want to come here and become a brand ambassador? That's not putting you on the path, you know? But then again, it could if depending on what you did. So I just wonder what did you find? Like, did consulting help or maybe slow down? I don't know, the process of getting a venue opened.
I think yes, it's probably helped. I think every experience that you have always helps you in one way or another. It not necessarily be obvious to you right then and there, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is an advantage when you open your bar to already know, like to be able to read a P&L sheet, to be able to understand that, P&L is isolated is not necessarily the only way to understand how business works, but like, to understand, to be able to, read a contract and understand what it says, or to be able to understand the value of making contracts, or, so definitely, yes, it prepares you to have been in business, before, but at the same time, it doesn't also, because there's so many new things that nobody tells you because nobody seems to know, like it's really, you just learn as you go and just hope for the best, to be honest, because there's so many things that I would have never thought that I would know how to do even a year ago, and that I know how to do now,
Can you mention one of those things? What is something you did not know how to do a year ago, but you know how to do now?
I mean, it can be anything from, like how to reassemble a fridge, or how
that. Did you have to do that?
or just like how to apply for, a license, or how to go into a meeting and understand, what people are actually talking about, or how to, deal with HMRC, or revenue and customs, for those not living in the UK, or, how to run a payroll, or, how to feel comfortable making decisions when you have absolutely no idea what you're doing.
It's super hard. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, definitely amongst them, suffer from imposter syndrome a fair bit. This feeling that, do I really know what I'm doing? And people are looking to me for advice and for guidance and for decisions, and shit, I'm just some guy that likes whiskey and cocktails. And it's, like, how do I do this? Small business to huge businesses, I've spoken to a lot of people who have that kind of feeling that, you don't know if you're qualified, but that's part of being an entrepreneur, is doing stuff you're not qualified for doing. I think that's probably is the definition of an entrepreneur: doing shit you're not qualified to do. What is there? What kind of challenges did you guys come up against? That were there any big curveballs that came along? Normally, when you open a bar, there's always, or start a new business, there's always a curveball. So, is there anything that you came across that was unforeseen, and probably more important, like how did you deal with that when you're faced with things you hadn't planned for? It could be delays or anything that came up. There's always something.
Oh, there's always something. I mean, we started working on this bar, like not this specific bar in the sense that the venue, the address where we are, but we started on this journey back in 2015. And like I say, we are slow. And we thought that it was going to be much more straightforward because we were naively believing some of the things that people were saying to us. Like, oh, it's going to be you achieved so much in this industry, it's going to be easy because you have a name, blah 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 blah. And then you understand that nobody actually gives a fuck. So sorry. And
very few landlords know who won like the Bacardi Legacy competition this year. Landlords don't know that.
No, exactly, and they don't care, to be honest. And so in the beginning, it was the first kind of hurdle was so many people, they come to you and they say I would really love to invest in you because I believe in you, I want to be part of this adventure, I want to be part of this company, blah blah blah. And then you have to, and it took us a while to understand sometimes that people do things from different motivations, and not everyone is motivated by what's good for you. So sometimes we ended up walking away from both venues, like sites where we just like, wow, this is someone comes to you and say, what, I'm going to give you this site for free, and no strings attached and blah blah blah. And then you start to see like there's always strings attached. Come on, like, I was not born yesterday, so give me. Then you start to read the contracts, and you start to see that, oh my god, I'm actually just selling everything, and I'm gonna own my own bar, but I'm not gonna own anything of my own bar. And you start to realize that you have to take the necessary steps to make sure that you actually understand what's going on, even if it slows you down, and even if it at the time feels like you are losing what you want, but you actually are not. So to navigate in the world of business, or in the world in general, you have to find good advisors, and you have to find advisors that have your back and have your best interest at heart, and they come sometimes in not the most obvious people, but when you find people that advises you, regardless of if hopefully it's not actually, a lot of the time it's not what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear to be able to make the right decisions. And you have to, when you find those people, you just hang on to them as best as you can, because they are priceless.
Can I ask on that, because I found that super interesting. In terms of, so did you seek out advisors, or did you have people in your kind of I suppose circle, if you like, that stepped up into that role, or were you actively going out going, hang on, I need someone I can connect with here? Because it's different. Some people are very purposeful in how they seek out mentors and advisors. Some of my friends are like very purposeful in terms of who they seek out. Whereas others simply reflect back and say, oh, this person was good at advising me, someone who just stepped into that role. But seeing how important advisors are, I'd love to know how did you find yours?
I would say both. Sometimes you seek out people that are very good at what they do, and which do things that are like completely different to what you do, and other times it's just you put an question out there and anyone can answer, and those who choose to answer are those you continue that conversation with. So I think one thing that I've learned in this process is that I'm not scared to ask for help. I don't feel like asking for help is a weakness, and I don't feel like I'm more stupid than other people just because I have to ask for help. I would rather ask for help and advice and come out on top than be scared to ask because someone would think that I'm stupid, not knowing the answer, and lose out on something because I was too scared to ask for help. So like I always ask. Probably a lot of people, they always assume that I'm like not that smart because I always ask very stupid questions.
I don't think that's the case.
but but it's through my whole life. I always been someone who asks questions, and even when people roll their eyes, I don't take it personal, because I would rather know the answer than to not know the answer. So so I think anything, like, depending what kind of field you want the advice from, then you try to seek out someone in your like circle maybe, and then or you ask for an introduction to someone that can help you. So
I think that's awesome. I think and it's such good advice for people. I want to back on that, like asking for help. Like, so a good example I maybe right now is, of course, we had COVID-19 down here, and we have I think we were just shy of 200 staff in our bar group. When it happened, we were just about to launch a new venue, and I've never dealt with this before. Like I said, I'm a bartender, so, but I know there's companies out there that may not have dealt with it before, but they have a lot of resources to help them make their decisions. So I just immediately contacted two of the biggest CEOs in bar and restaurant world in Australia, and I was like, "Fuck, I need help." Like, what are you doing here, and how are you dealing with this, and what's your approach to this, and how's your trade affected, and all of those things. And it was incredible the amount of assistance I was given because I asked for help, like incredible assistance. And so I think a lot of the time, I think Paige Orbert said this, she was on this podcast last year, and one of the things she said was, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And I thought that was great advice. And I also think, not being scared to ask for help, and not being scared to go to people and being honest and saying, hey, I need some help with it. I think it's a strength. Like, maybe I just choose to see it as a strength because I'm so frequently asking for help. But I genuinely believe it is a real strength to be able to do that. I have a couple of more questions for you before you wrap it up. And we talked about diversity before, and so I'm not going to ask too much more about that, but I do want to ask about, want to ask about when you hire your staff, do you have any specific, I want to go into diversity. I want to, now that I think about it, I do want to have a bit more. When you say that when you were opening Tayer Elementary, you were looking to build as diverse a team as possible. I remember reading that statement that you were looking for as diverse a team as possible. What did you mean by diverse in that context? And why is having a diverse team so important? We briefly touched on it before, but I don't think we covered, what exactly you mean by diverse and why diversity was so important.
I think that, for me, I really enjoy being around people that have different backgrounds than myself, because I know that I come from a very privileged background and upbringing, in the sense that like I had parents that loved me enormously. I had a very safe childhood. I had a very live in one of the richest countries in the world, which is also quite a small country, so you have a lot of space, you have a lot of nature, and you have the social protection that a working democracy gives you, and so and so. But if you never go out of that bubble, you don't understand that this is not the life for everyone, and I like to have people with different backgrounds and different perspectives, different opinions. So like when, for example, some of our team members at the bar, they've worked with us in other places before, or we've known them for years, and they've been waiting almost as long as we have, and we have we are obviously a very small company, so we have maybe 12 people, including ourselves, but we still have 7-8 different nationalities, so and by that you have always a discussion about everything, because something that can be so rudimental to someone is like a big deal for someone else. And I think if you want, because we always think about ourselves as a London bar. I think pictures or images doesn't necessarily translate the kind of atmosphere of the bar to the full extent. But when people come inside, it's like, oh my God, this is like crazy, because this feels like it could be anywhere in the world, but it also feels like it cannot be anywhere else in London. And what is London? London is multicultural. It's one of the most diverse cities in the world. And if you want everyone to come to your bar, then everyone also needs to work at your bar. So
I love that.
I think also it's a very stale way of looking at your workplace, in the sense that the more experienced you are, the more you know. But who says that someone that comes in with a fresh look aren't able to make improvements, because their mind is not set in the same way as you. So for us, we had a lot of thoughts about how we wanted to run the bar. And like one of the most controversial perhaps ideas or choices that we made was to take away the classic hierarchy, and to not separate people by positions or experience or how long they worked in the industry. So in the bar, you either work as a barback, which is like where you have to start when you are new, and then you kind of work yourself into normal rotation, and then you are either working in the bar or you're working in the kitchen. So and that's only because of the skill sets, the technical skill sets are too different that to keep them on the same. But if you work in the bar, it doesn't matter how long you worked in the industry or whatever, we all have the same responsibilities, we all have the same voice, we all have the same authority. We just identify the key roles in the bar that needs to be fulfilled, and we all just rotate on a weekly basis through those roles. So one week you are the host, one week you are in the elementary bar, one week you are running station 1 in Tayer, or one week you are the barback. It doesn't matter, like as long as the week that you are whatever role, you fulfill those tasks and you have the responsibilities that comes with that role. But in the big scheme of things, we are all equal.
That's really interesting. So you still and you are rotating people through like that every week. There's a different position. Is that how you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Super interesting. I find that really. I mean, we've done similar in some of our venues. I don't think we do it now, but I find that to be really, really interesting approach. When you hire your staff, is there anything specific that you like questions that you ask them, or like I mentioned, like one of mine always used to be, what's your job once you leave here? And also in interviewing, like is there anything specific that you look for in people that you want to work with you on your team? Is there a must-have qualification?
I think I probably when I interview people, it's a weird experience probably for those that I speak with, because I just ask them the most random questions that I can find, like if you had to dance on a Saturday, what kind of style would you dance? Or if you had to listen to only one style of music for the rest of your life, what would it be? Like if you had to choose one cast member from what's it called, Brady Bunch, who would that be? Like I don't ask them questions necessarily about the industry and work too much, because I don't really care, because I think that I want to see their personality rather than how they feel about shaking, because I don't care what your feelings about shaking is, because we do so much training in-house here that at some point you will either convince us that your method is better, or we convince you that our method is better. That, doesn't really matter. What I want to know is that, like, what is your personality traits? Are you the kind of person that looks at a guest with an empty glass or water glass and you walk over and you top up that glass, or are you just a person that looks at that empty glass and you don't care? Because only one of those people will be able to work in my bar. If you know what I mean.
I love
So
it.
yeah, I also don't like people who agrees with everything I say. Sometimes in an interview I'll just say something like very random that I know is wrong, and I'll just see if they agree with it or not, because I don't necessarily want people that agrees with me blindly. I want people that are intuitive, but also questions things. Like if I say go out in the road and shake a cocktail, I want that person to say why, because that makes absolutely no sense. And unless I can convince you that it's something you should do, you shouldn't do it, because you most likely you'll be hit by a car or a bus, and it's you shouldn't go through life without questioning people. So I want people that are open-minded enough to accept that there's not necessarily only one road to get to where you want. But I also want people that are, when you explain to them, because I think that is the key. You need to give people the why in anything you do, not just how and what, but you need to explain to them why you're doing something. And I don't necessarily believe, well, to a point I do, but in the bigger things, I don't believe in micromanaging people, because I don't want to spend my time going around telling everyone what to do. I want them to understand why I feel strongly about certain things, like why we always smile to people, why we always greet people, why we always talk with people, why we care about people. And then I want them to make their own decisions on how that translates to them. Like, as long as you are a good host in the bar, when you have guests, as long as you care about the well-being of those guests, I don't want to micromanage how you care about other people, because for some people it can be topping up the water every 2 minutes every time they take a sip. For others it can be making sure that the chairs are aligned, or that they're the other people don't disturb them, or it can be translated into so many different things for so many different people. But the most important thing is that they have this sense of urgency and sense of care, and that they see these things, because so many people don't.
That's awesome. I think understanding the why is so important. That a lot of time if people don't question the way things are being done to a certain degree, then all of a sudden things are happening in the venue that shouldn't be happening because someone did it once, and then other people never questioned it, and they just kind of carried on doing the same things. That's super smart. Now, I know we're gonna finish up soon. I've kept you on a call for a long time here, but to wrap it all up, besides being Norwegian and having both kind of made careers overseas, and we both love akvavit and cocktails, etc., we have something else in common that I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about, mostly because I get asked these questions all the time, and I'd love your take on it as well. So when I first started, we started an import company years ago, importing vodka, my wife and I, and we worked together and operated as co-founders, both our importing business and our consultancy firm that we had for a decade. And we worked together for a long time, and she worked in the bars as well up until a couple of years ago. And you and Alex, of course, are in a similar position where you're, business, both, partners in life and partners in business. And for me, this is the fucking dream scenario. But for a lot of people, it sounds like a fate worse than death. So can I ask, how do you guys balance, this kind of dual partnership, if you like? How do you go about that? Do you have any rules that you follow, or is it just like a fluid, dynamic relationships? You set borders up, that's mine, it's yours. How do you guys deal with it? I think it's something that a lot of people would be curious about.
In the beginning, it was a little bit of a struggle in the sense that you just have to learn each other's like limits, or limits, boundaries maybe, and just understand, you know, understand when to push and when to not push. Maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, but, you know, it's, I think ultimately it's just about respect, you know, and as much as um, I enjoy, you know, working with Alex, and as much as I actually couldn't imagine not working together now that we've done it for so long. And at the end of the day, you also need to nurture the personal relationship, you know, because now it's from Monday to Saturday. We are in the bar more or less from, you know, some 10 in the morning till maybe like 2 in the morning again. And when we are at work, we're very conscious about the fact that we need to have a professional relationship, and we also, you know, you don't want to put the burden of the fact that you're in a relationship on other people, so you need to be respectful to the rest of the team, so that you don't put them in difficult situations where they feel like, oh my god, it feels like my parents are fighting, what should I do, you know? So you would never do that in front of other people. We would never disagree in front of other people, and you know, at the on the opposite side, it's to me it's been such an amazing experience, because at the end of the day, what everyone wants is just to feel that someone has your back, and at the very least, that's what we have or do give each other. We always, you know, have each other back. We always very loyal to each other. To be honest, like, I really enjoy, even if we spend almost all of our time together, I really enjoy it, because you get very spoiled in the sense that you get used to working with each other, and we have very similar ways or ethos behind working. So, you know, you never have to ask why you don't want to show up to work. You never have to ask why you're lazy, or like these kind of like very basic things, because and this it goes actually to with our entire team, is like our team, they show up when they're supposed to, they always work hard, they always stay longer, they do what is necessary to get shit done. And you know, like, I think you just have to really think about what is your motivation and what is it that you want. And for me, like, I know that as much as I enjoy the bar, I enjoy all the businesses that we do together, all the projects that we do together, but at the end of the day, what is the most important is to me is Alex. You know, like, I would gladly walk away from everything, all the businesses, as long as we have each other. So I think that, you know, you have to be, you know, very aware of what your motivation is, and where your loyalty lies. And for us, I think that our loyalty lies with each other, before, you know, our professional each other.
I think that's such a great, I mean, such a good answer and such a great way to summarize. I think it's something you can draw the analogy with kids. You know, what happens, you know, quite often when a couple has children is that they go from being a couple to being parents, and their role now as a team is centered around parenting, not about having a romantic relationships. And the same thing can happen with business, where all of a sudden, okay, now we're business partners, and the whole life is just consumed by work and business. But, you know, keeping that spark alive and keeping the relationship going is such an important part of it. And I think personally, I think working together gives you more opportunities to to be wonderful to your partner than if you're working far apart. It's been such an amazing chat, and it's so good to have you on the podcast. I've got a couple of quick fire questions. Actually, I was going to ask you one kind of closing question here, because we've been chatting for a while. It's a bit of a deep one. So if you could make one sweeping change to our industry, what would that one thing be? So it could be locally, globally, it could be a legislative measure, it could be trends, behaviors from guests or staff. So basically anything that you'd love to see change within our industry. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but hopefully you have some wise words for us to finish on. No pressure.
Yes, that is a big one. I think if I could make one change, it would be towards some kind of formalized education, because I fear for our industry that we, in the long terms, we will suffer if we can't get education into a systematic institution where you can offer, proper knowledge, not necessarily like propaganda in the form of marketing and brand work, but like uniquely like unbiased information where people can learn the skills that they actually need to make hospitality a lifelong career, rather than just something that you do when you are young. That is incredible. I mean, that's, is my answer to, if I was going to answer that question. It's exactly what we're trying to do with Ananas as a starting point, is to create that like a benchmark level of knowledge and training and skills that you need to have to work in industry. Monica, it's been just amazing to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out, especially during this, really difficult time that the industry is going through, to chat to us. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, it's been really lovely, and I really, all of your advice and learning has been just really, really brilliant, and I really think people, take a lot away from this. So thank you so much for being part of the podcast. All right. Boom, baby. This is Sven again. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you found that both interesting and informative, and that there was something in there for you that you can take with you in your future career in hospitality. Now, if you want to follow what we're doing here at Ananas, pop over to our Facebook page. You can find us on facebook.com/Ananas Academy. Give us a thumbs up and a like, and there'll be loads of material on there. We'll be announcing any new courses and new podcasts on there as well. And if you're interested in learning more about what it takes to be a great bartender or a great waiter or a great server in general, go to ananasacademy.com and create your own profile. Now, if you're an owner or a venue manager and you'd like to give the gift of Ananas to your team, you can visit ananasacademy.com and create your own organization there and start inviting your team to start learning. That's it. Rock and roll. I hope to see you back here again soon for more podcasts. Cheers and kapow. Boom.